Welcome to this special episode of SJS Recommends podcast. Today we are going to wrap up our 2024. We started doing SJS Recommends, I think it was back in early February, but of course before that we had done 3 other podcasts. One was about Snowberry, the second one was about The Sopranos, and the third one was about like film canons. So those were obviously very interesting, but then Alte suggested to me that it would be cool to maybe talk about some special films that I could choose and recommend. And that was how SJS Recommends came to be. And I thought it was a great idea. And I feel like I've learned a lot from this podcast, but we'll get into that a bit more later. But the idea of this special end of the year podcast is to kind of talk about our film years in general, and then also talk about some of the films that we discussed on the podcast, maybe our top 10 favorite films out of the 30 something that we discussed, and then also mention a few of the favorite podcast discussions that we did. I think most of them, in my opinion, were good, or I mean, even all of them were good, but some of them were better than others, I would say. So I'll mention some of the best ones. Yeah, but 2024, obviously there's a couple more days of it left as we are shooting this on 29th of December, but I have already watched more films than I did last year. I'm a bit over 300 films at the moment. But as always, I have had a couple of film slumps. For example, in October, I didn't watch a single film, but then in November and December, I've been watching lots of films, and it has been great. And also, as I've gotten older, I've learned that I shouldn't get worried about the film slumps because the passion will always come back after maybe a month or 2 weeks or whatever it will be. But a few years ago when I was younger, I used to think that I would get really worried when I had a film slump. I thought that, am I actually cinephile? Do I actually love films or not? But that doesn't happen to me anymore, so I'm glad that it doesn't. And I watched lots of different types of films this year. Obviously, Japan was a big theme. I probably watched like 150 Japanese films or something like that, and not that many English language films, although I watched some, and of course watched European cinema and cinema from all over the world, basically. And now currently I've been in a kind of French film mode by watching or rewatching some Romer films and things like that. But yeah, as always, the year has been a bit all over the place in terms of watching. I've also been watching lot more animation, both in terms of shows, but also some movies. So that's been fun. But yeah, overall, it was a pretty solid year for film watching. Not one of my peak years, but it was better than the last year. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean it was a great film watching year for me. Might even be the best one I've might have ever had, to be honest. I've just seen so much great cinema this year, uh, and also catching up on great cinema. To be honest, that most have already seen, and I'm seeing for the first time. And this podcast was really great because, yeah, I mean, it's just not just the discussions, but I mean, thanks to you, you really pushed the envelope, and I had so many like first time experiences with directors, right? So, you know, first Godard, right, with Leshin was not the Godard maybe most start with, but thanks to you, I started with Leshin was. Um, you know, Zvyagintsev, um, with The Return, first time seeing something by him. Um, Kim Kaduk, like three Iron, first time Kim Kaduk, first time Coreda. Um, uh, you know, what else? Oh, Bellatar, first time, kind of bringing in Simon Liang, um, Li Chengdong, uh, as well as Hu Xiaosen. I mean, so really incredible year. Um, a lot of good cinema experiences as well. So I went a bit crazy with going to the cinema as well because before I was living somewhere where I didn't have access to like any art house cinema. So yeah, it's been great, but I also understand what you're saying. I mean, I think this year I pressed on pretty hard in terms of film watching, but there were moments that I could, at sense if you missed a few days and you had watched a film, like you said, the film, you would get this feeling like, okay, am I falling out of love with it, or am I gonna continue on? Or but like you said, it's like a few days and it just returns back. In this podcast, always inspired. Your videos, always inspired. Um, and the films themselves just inspired. So, and one thing is that this wasn't a year of heavy reading for me, but watching some of these films because they're so connected to um, great literature too, that it inspired me to kind of push and get back into reading literature as well. So yeah, really, really, really great film year for me.
Yeah, I think based on the letterbox numbers, you've watched a little bit more than me. I think you were like at 330 or
What?
something,
Really?
and I'm like
That's crazy.
306 or 7. So you've seen like 2 dozen more than me, something like that.
Yeah, except you've seen like thousands and thousands of films. So overall, no, but okay, yeah, I'm glad I kept pace with you.
And yeah, for me, the reading year wasn't very good either. I mean, for manga, it was decent, but for literature, it wasn't that good. Although one highlight for me was that I finally read my first Shakespeare plays, because I obviously have wanted to read Shakespeare for a long time, and it was such an embarrassment that I hadn't read any. But now I've read again Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet, and I'm gonna, now that we are still in the holiday period, read Winter's Tale, which
Oh,
Tony
nice.
really loves that one, and obviously the Romeo film Tale of Winter is related to that, and I just watched that on Christmas Eve, and Tony watched it as well. So yeah, I'm really hyped about that.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, that's great. I haven't read any Shakespeare this year. Just went to one production of Macbeth, uh, which was great. But yeah, I'm looking forward to in the following year. Yeah, just watching some film adaptations of Shakespeare. I think I would like to read some too. I had a dream one night where I was like in this art house cinema, like Vancouver, and then um, what I was watching there was a great film adaptation, in my opinion, of Merchant of Venice that has Al Pacino. So, and then I just woke up feeling very longing for watching something that Shakespeare based. Either watched, one of the plays, productions that I have from BBC, or read some Shakespeare and all that. So hopefully in 2025 more Shakespeare.
Yeah, I also want to watch more of those adaptations. Like there's the Orson Welles Macbeth. I haven't seen that, and then there's like even the Roman Polanski Macbeth. That's apparently pretty good. There's obviously Hamlet adaptations as well, and even beyond Shakespeare, I've actually recently been thinking that I want to watch the mid 2000s adaptation of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. I read the book like a couple of years ago, but apparently that adaptation is very good. So it would be a nice way to return to that world, and I need to get back to reading Jane Austen in general, but I really enjoyed Pride and Prejudice. But yeah, and then another thing about my film year is that this year I was very much of a mood watcher, that I didn't really focus on these lists like the Harvard list or the Criterion
Mhm.
thing or anything. I just kind of watched whatever I felt like, and then there were certain themes of watching, obviously like certain directors and stuff like Obayashi, for example, and Ozu, and I think Agnieszka Varda. I watched lots of her films early
Okay.
in
Okay.
the year, and then again, also I rewatched maybe a bit more films than I usually do due to the podcast, and also be rewatching also beyond the podcast some films, especially now recently in the holiday period. I rewatched some Rome films, for example, and yeah, and I might rewatch more in the next few days, because I'm planning to hopefully watch lots of films in the New Year's Eve and day, and maybe do a couple of film marathons then. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, my year was a bit Romare light. I think I only saw the one with you for the podcast this year, so definitely would want to watch more Romare uh, next year because I really do enjoy Romare's films. So yeah, it's been fun, and I'm kind of looking forward to the year ahead as well. And you mentioned this, yeah, Macbeth, Wells Macbeth. I think Kino put it out this year, right? So hopefully in one of the sales next year, it'll come up from Kino, and I can pick that one up because I would love to see that. Um, and the Polanski Macbeth, I don't think I've seen since like high school, so it'd be good to watch that again. And then also some of the adaptations that one of them you suggested, Throne of Blood, which I still haven't seen yet. So
And I think you focused a lot on the Criterion collection this year. I've seen, like, looking at your letterbox page and stuff, that lots of Criterion films, and of course many of my favorite films are on Criterion. So I've seen you log many of my favorites, both for the podcast but also beyond the podcast. Like, I mean, there were a few that I saw that it was fun to see you watch, like Kaurismäki is the Man Without a Past, for example.
oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, and that wasn't a first this year, uh, Kaurismäki, but that started last year because you had recommended that wonderful double bill of Jean Dielman and Match Factory Girl. And I ended up watching the Match Factory Girl, and immediately after watched Ariel, and then this year, yeah, I got to watch some good Kaurismäki films thanks to you recommending that set that's over there
Yeah.
from Artificial Eye. So I've been going through his filmography a bit. So yeah, The Man Without a Past, Shadows in Paradise. I mean, Crime and even his first or the first one that's in the set, Crime and Punishment. I've really been enjoying Kaurismäki, and one film I'm really excited to see that's on the Criterion Channel is that eight eight dead no is it 12 deadly shots, eight deadly shots, eight
Eight,
deadly
eight.
shots, eight deadly shots, right? Um, and I kind of want to watch it like um, together instead of like parceling it out over days because it's all together. Whatever each, it's like 4 episodes or something like that.
Yeah, it's like 5 hours. So.
Yeah, so yeah, would really very much like to watch that as well. Um, Sounds like a really interesting film. You've seen that already, I would presume.
No, the embarrassing thing is that I haven't seen it, even
Oh,
though
okay. Okay,
Finnish
well,
critics.
that's
So
okay as well.
yeah, but Finnish critics always choose it as the best Finnish film ever made. So it's pretty embarrassing that I haven't seen.
No, that's okay.
And there are two different versions of it, like a kind of like with many of the Bergman films, that there's a shorter film version and then the longer version. Obviously, you should watch the longer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's definitely there. But yes, you're right. I did focus on Criterion films or films that have been released in the Criterion collection, just as I think like you said, we talk about priorities. Some people say, oh, you shouldn't prioritize and you shouldn't really have a plan. Um, I can understand that, but I think the point where I'm at in my life, right? Being about to turn 46 early next year, I kind of say, well, when will I get through all the cinema if I don't have a bit of goal orientation and direction? Because we're not spoiled for choice. We have so much choice of what's available to watch. And one interesting point you made in one of your videos was with mood watching, and I've had um, moments like that too in the year where I've been like, oh, I'm not in the mood for this, I'm not in the mood for that. But one thing you said was so important. You said that sometimes you feel like you're not in the mood, but if you just put something on, you realize that is exactly what you wanted to watch. So I noticed that a lot, that I would have those moments where I'm in a certain mood, and then I end up watching a movie based on my mood, and I don't always feel the satisfaction when I went with my mood, but when I kind of said, oh, I'm kind of in the mood for like an action movie, and I end up putting on like, I don't know, a Bergman film that I haven't yet seen. I know it's kind of extreme, and I don't mean it to sound kind of pretentious, which is one of our favorite words. Pretentious and self-indulgent are our favorite words. Um, but all of a sudden, it's like you watch it and you say, "Oh, that's exactly like that. That actually gave me what I was looking for that I didn't realize I was looking for." So, not that action movies are bad. I enjoy them too.
Yeah, I'll mention a couple of the others that you watched. Like one was The Lobster. I think you watched The Lobster.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The lobster. The lobster's out there. I mean, my wife absolutely loved the lobster. I I liked it, but it's out there. So I want to watch it again. I think I couldn't. I felt like there's so much going on in that film. Like you have to watch it again to fully absorb it and get uh, deeper into the world of the film. But yeah, that's a great film. Yeah, I enjoyed that. And I know we were supposed to discuss it, so sometimes I'm like, I ended up with a list where I would just sit there and say, "Oh, I can't watch that because I think we're going to discuss it." I don't care what. But then I said, "Okay, you know what? I'll start watching these, and then we can be flexible. It doesn't have to be that it's necessarily my first time watch. We can still discuss some of these films because I'd want to watch them again." Yeah.
And there are also millions of possible first time watches. So
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
they will never
I'll
end.
I'll just have shelves reserved. Oh, I can't watch this till this. Yeah, I mean Harakiri, we never did the discussion on, but I watched it embarrassingly. First time ever this year I watched Kobayashi's Harakiri. I mean, I don't know how to explain that. When I've seen the remake, but I haven't seen the original. But yeah, that was something else.
Then you watched Letter Never Sent. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, Letter Never Sent was amazing. I watched that when I was in uh, Vancouver. Yeah, when we went up to Whistler and I actually saw it on the Moss Film website because at that time I was traveling. So, but yeah, that's wonderful film. Again, another film that it's like you really need to. Once is not enough. You watch it once and you're like you haven't registered everything this film is. You got to watch it again to really grasp it.
And then I'm trying to think what were some of the. I think you recently watched The Virgin Spring.
Yes.
Yeah, I need to rewatch that myself.
Yeah, and I can't believe that. I mean, learning about the Virgin Spring and how like I guess Truffaut and Godard and they were disappointed in Bergman for
Yeah.
making that film, and he himself is like embarrassed of that film, and you're like, how is that possible? Like, why are you embarrassed of this film? Such a great film.
Yeah, it's
Such a
one of
great
his
film.
best. So yeah, check your letterbox very quickly so that I don't forget any feelings because I feel like there were so many that kind of caught my eye that oh yeah, you watched that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, there were a lot.
No, well, you watched 12 Monkeys.
Yeah, yeah.
Terry Gilliam.
Finally, finally, it was on the Criterion Channel, so I was like, it's about time I watch it.
Oh, you watched the Marlon Riggs film Tongues Untied, which is my favorite film.
Yeah,
That's great.
my God, yeah, that's a yeah, Marlon Riggs.
Nights of Cabiria.
Oh yes. Oh yeah, that's a great film. Love that movie. Yeah, yeah. I've been yeah, a lot of highlights. I mean, I guess in these years, yeah, this year because yeah, some directors I went quite heavy, like Ozu. I went like Ozu crazy,
Yeah.
and I want to keep going Ozu crazy. And like you said, we don't do well these plebeian ranks, and I haven't really been. I've been kind of skittish about going and ranking and saying, "Oh, my top 10 directors," but right now Ozu is my number one. Like that's just that became just affirmed this year. I just was watching Ozu and I'm like, that's it. Like Ozu is my number one. Like I even announced it to my wife. She's like, oh, okay, really? And I was like, yep, that's it. Like right now, and I don't know if he'll ever get knocked off, but Ozu's my number one. He's just one of the greatest artists who's ever lived. So
And for me, he's number 4. So
yeah, because he still got Lynch number one.
no, it might be Romer now after the rewatch.
Okay, Romer. Okay.
It's very close. Yeah, it's very.
Yeah. So,
but Romer now has the sole place on my favorites list as a director who has 10 films on my favorite films list.
Oh yeah.
So even more than Bergman. Bergman has 9, I think. Fassbinder has 8 or so.
Okay.
Yeah. But then you watched Godard's Contempt, which is one of my favorites from him.
Yeah. Godard is like challenging. I find Godard challenging. I think that Contempt's a great film. But yeah, I still like I find it's a hard work. And just like, because there's so much Godard does or is doing that I probably aren't even picking up. But yeah, I enjoyed Contempt. Yes, I definitely enjoyed Contempt.
And then if I mention a couple more, you watched Mouchette, which is maybe my favorite press also.
Oh, shit. So dark.
Yeah,
so dark. Yeah.
And you also watched Breathless by Godard. But
yeah, I did. And I enjoyed Breathless. Yeah. I enjoyed Breathless. That's a good film.
A Woman Under the Influence.
Yeah, I love I loved A Woman Under the Influence because I saw Husbands earlier in the year.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to make of Husbands, right? Like I feel like I want to watch it again because I'd never seen any other Cassavetes, so it was just a whole like jarring experience. Husbands, and A Woman Under the Influence was just amazing. It's just so visceral. It's just so deep, and it's just so real. Like you can feel the world, and you can feel her challenges, and you can relate to her challenges, and at the other side, what Peter Falk is doing, and everyone around it that's kind of tied up. That's an incredible film and an incredible performance. Like, it just lives in my mind. What happens in that film?
Obviously, 70s is known for the American crime films, but I would say that instead of those Dude Bro films, I would say Woman Under the Influence is maybe the best American film of the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a top American film, I think, overall, just because of the point of view, how it's made, the sensitivity, and the complexity of the world, and what's involved in it. And in some ways, some people would. I feel it goes a long way to returning the dignity to what she's going through, even though someone might think the opposite, by having it in such a verity style, and like really in some ways putting the ugliness kind of out there, and leaving the character and Gina Rowlands exposed to judgment and critique, but it creates such, I mean, because I can't think of other words other than empathy, and we use this word a lot, but the kind of humanity, the empathy, and I would say the return of dignity for what those struggles are. So I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, even Barry Jenkins mentioned empathy when he took the Cassavetes set in his Criterion Closet video.
Yeah, and that's one I hope to watch a lot of Cassavetes this coming year. Still waiting for my Cassavetes set, which I got to the Barnes and Noble sale, but it takes a while to get here to the UK. So.
And I've seen all of his films, so I mean there aren't that many, 12, I think. So. Yeah. Only one of them is bad. So.
Oh yeah, okay. Which one do you think is bad?
Yeah, it's not on the set or not on the Criterion.
Oh, okay.
But it was like he didn't even direct it fully himself. It was with somebody else. Oh God, I don't remember the name of it all. But it's like totally different. It feels like an awful like family movie almost.
And you
but
saw
it's
Mike and
no,
Nikki this year, right? You said it's not a
yeah,
Cassavetes directed film, but you said you liked that film, right?
yeah, it was really, really good. Yeah, that kind of, I didn't know what to think of it at first, but then it just kept growing on me, and it's one of the, again, we talked a lot about masculinity when we talked about I've Always Loved You, but Mikey and Nikki is a very interesting film about masculinity as well. So.
I have a question for you. Is it always that the moment the movie ends, you have a feeling for it, or sometimes it comes as a result of sitting with it for a while, even a few hours, a day, a week, that makes you kind of really appreciate what it was.
Yeah, I think these days my initial response is usually fairly accurate, but of course, like the understanding of the film and appreciation can sometimes grow much more. And there have been films that, well, I think I mentioned Romer's Tale of Winter. Like when I watched it, I thought that, yeah, it's a great film, but not quite a favorite. But then a couple of months after, I had been thinking about the themes and the plot and the vibe of the film, and then it kind of became a favorite later on after some pondering. So it really depends on the film, but usually my initial response is pretty accurate because at this point I've seen so many films and I know my taste so well, and it's the same case with music that I often can. I don't know after the first listen that whether this is gonna become a favorite or not. Although there are still some of those exceptions where I not a huge fan of an album at first, and then it grows on me. Like Danny Brown's Atrocity Exhibition, for example. I didn't like it at first, and I hated his voice first, but then as I went back to it like a year later, then it just clicked with me, and I fell in love with it. So yeah, it really depends.
Yeah, yeah. What I find is there are certain films or filmmakers and all that. It's just immediate when I'm watching it. Even as soon as it starts, you kind of just are like just totally dialed in. And then some are the slow burn where it's I don't immediately I can't immediately place the film. And then like over time I start reflecting on the film and what it's trying what because I think like I find sometimes that there's a uh like lack of alignment or right it's like you go in and then you're used to seeing certain things or there's certain things as the film starts you think that you are going to see and then the film goes in a lot of ways and then you're not totally clicked in but that doesn't mean that it's a bad film or you don't like it it's that you haven't clicked with it yet like I mean obviously I had that experience with Oasis this year but I've been thinking about that film ever since and now I'm like keep thinking okay when am I going to go back and maybe rewatch that or watch other Lee Chang Dong to kind of because like I said with Cassavetes, it's like I watched Husbands and I didn't quite know what to make of it. But when I saw Women Under the Influence, I kind of understood Husbands more. And then I started thinking, okay, I get it. Because, you know, some things are really jarring. And when you go and see an Oasis or a Husbands, it's like there are these jarring moments and you don't know what to make of it. And especially if you've been raised in certain ways or certain households and you're taught certain things about, I don't know, what's right, what's wrong, you know, shame and all these kinds of things. And then there are those filmmakers that really want to break walls and say, no, let's not pretend, let's look at, you know, some of the things that actually happen. Let's look at, um, you know, these kinds of males in this situation in this world and what are their actual frustrations and anxieties and struggles and questions and all that um, you know as they kind of go on this bender of a journey you know trying to figure things out so yeah sometimes it takes me time I don't always click in.
Yeah, and okay, the first couple of years of being a cinephile, like back then, there were lots of things that I didn't like that I like now. Like, for example, Press On was really hard for me to get into at first, but now he's one of my top 10 filmmakers. So sometimes it just takes a few years to get into something. And even with Tarkovsky, my feelings have changed at least a few times. Actually, I started loving him. Then there was a period when I got tired of him for a while, but then I started loving his films again. So sometimes they can also, your mind change, but then it might changes back as well. So that's interesting. And then there are still like some of those very conflicting films. Actually, yesterday morning I watched the Yorgos Lanthimos film Poor Things, and that's actually a film that I have bit kind of conflicting feelings about. I liked a lot about it, and it was, like, I think, generally a pleasant surprise because I thought that he's going all mainstream. It cannot be good, but it was quite good. But at the same time, it kind of like Wes Anderson films. It had that kind of pseudo art house feeling to it. That on the surface it seems like a very sophisticated film, but then when you start like peeling the layers of it, it feels like it's a very kind of simplistic exploration of the themes of the film and stuff. Even though the style is really beautiful, but then it's not that deep when you compare it to even his earlier films, but also just deeper films in general. But I overall still really enjoyed that film a bit more than I thought I would.
Yeah, I need to watch more Lantimos, but I know what you mean. I know exactly like what you mean. You can have that feeling of ambivalence when you watch something that's now got the a certain backing, and then it's kind of like, because that person has the flair, there is that hook that brings you in, and then but maybe it's not taking you as far, or it's not willing to go take as many risks as um, before. So yeah, that can make you feel like, is it of the same? But I think there's still mm, like things to enjoy. Um, you know, um, Another thing I was thinking about this year was feeling intimidated, like Ozu. Like I was so intimidated to watch Ozu that I actually avoided watching Ozu even after I watched the first Ozu, like, and loved. So I saw Flavor of Green Tea Over Ice like last year, I think, and I enjoyed it, but I still kept feeling this fear, um, because of, like, you know what you were saying about how people would critique that, and I'm like, oh, what if I kind of feel that? I felt even intimidated before seeing like Karusmaki and all this kind of stuff, and then sometimes it's like you do that, and then you watch it, and then you're like, what was I fearing about encountering this uh, person's work? So like sometimes that happens. Do you ever feel that, like, oh, I'm a bit, or in the past, did you ever feel intimidated to kind of go into someone's film or filmography?
Yeah, sometimes, but not as much anymore. Yeah, like people like Bellatar was definitely intimidating for me, especially because my first experience with him was negative with the touring horse. But now I need to rewatch
Oh yeah,
that
it's
because I might like it now. Yeah,
I get that was your first Bellatar. That's amazing.
yeah.
Oh man, yeah.
And
My
back
mom,
then, I
my
again didn't have slow cinema experience at all, besides like a couple of Tarkovsky films.
yeah. As you know, I saw that in the cinema this year, but seen a few Bellatars in the cinema successively as part of the season. But I think it was the only one my wife saw, and she was just like tortured by the turn horse. She just, by the end of it, just the look on her face, and she was just yeah. And I don't know if that's part of Bellatar's humor, to actually torture you a little bit, because there's just the endless, the repetitive. Um, yeah, I can see that with the turn horse. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not that intimidated anymore. But of course, sometimes certain like preconceptions about something might kind of prevent me from watching it because obviously you sometimes think that, oh yeah, that director isn't for me, even though he might be. And yeah, like sometimes I fall into the trap of thinking that something is too mainstream, that I won't like it because it's so mainstream, even though it's not true always. So although with like live action films, it's usually true, but with men like anime, for example, I love many mainstream things. So it really depends on the art form.
Yeah,
But
true.
with literature, I tend to go for the classics. But I've tried to think that I should read a bit more contemporary stuff and see what's out there, and not limit myself too much into something. Yeah,
No, yeah, yeah, that's true because yeah, sometimes you can think of that way too. I do that as well, and I think I'm more guilty of it recently. That I'm a bit like, well, I'm not sure. Like what you said about Poor Things, I have this reservation also with some of the films that are coming out that you just get this nervousness that all right, looks interesting and all that kind of stuff, but you get nervous that you're going to watch it and then it's going to not quite uh you know satisfy you, and then you don't also want to be that critical. But I think, yeah, like you said, I think we it's important to have open minds as well, because if you don't look at contemporary art, and we could discuss about like art as a reflection of society and all that kind of stuff, then you're really not always dialing into what's there and what's being done with what's there. And maybe you're taking this kind of head in the sand approach and say, I'm only going to watch this and I'm not going to watch anything that's contemporary and came out this year or last year. And so I think my mindset has been geared towards the kind of more classics, just because I feel like I'm trying to catch up with a lot of these that I haven't seen, and I just feel it's a travesty that I haven't seen them yet. So I try to focus on that. But I do see that, well, okay, there are some films, contemporary, that might be also worth my time to kind of watch. But I find it hard to balance the time, because despite watching whatever 335 films this year, that came at a cost of like overextending myself, to be honest, because yeah, with work and everything like that, yeah, I was really pushing to keep watching. But sometimes you need gaps, like you said, and a break, and you can't constantly be hitting it that hard.
and one contemporary film that we both watched this year was Koreeda's Monster,
Yeah,
which was really good. Although again, I liked some of the earlier stuff more, but it was still really good.
yeah, it was a good film. um yeah, also interesting, like kind of variations on some of the themes he explores, but the new directions. Unfortunately, I watched that on the plane, which I wasn't too happy about. I didn't really want to watch that on the plane, because I think Koreeda is an immersive filmmaker. Like, it doesn't mean that there needs to be lots of going on, but he's very much immersive. So even when I watch at home, like Father Like Son or Mabarosi, um, Still Walking, like I feel like I still would love to see his work in the cinema,
Yeah,
because of the visual landscape, the soundscapes he creates. Um, doesn't mean that there's lots going on, but he's very much interested in immersing you, and I think that part was lacking for me watching Monster on like this on you know on a screen on a flight. But I had to watch it. I just couldn't help myself.
yeah. I've never watched the film on the plane. I always listen to music. So yeah,
Yeah, um, it's a bit hard for me. I do listen to music sometimes on the plane, but it's a bit hard because all the glowing screens they keep. So I need something to. So
And many of the Helsinki-London flights actually don't have the screens, so you cannot even watch the movies.
Yeah, so that's how long is that flight?
3 hours.
Yeah, because when you go to Vancouver, it's like 9.5. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, the
I've always
longest.
fancied myself wanting to be that person that can read a book
Yeah.
on a plane, but I like never can.
I was once like working on my bachelor's dissertation on the plane, so I
Oh
had kind
wow,
of printed out these journal articles and stuff, so I looked like really smart. Then I was
well
going
that's
through these
impressive that you could do
academic
that.
articles. Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
was
that's
just like
great.
reading through them and like underlining important parts and stuff like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think well, as we've discussed, I'm on autism spectrum, so I really have find it hard on planes because there's so many people about, and then you pick up on everything. So film is the only thing that can just help me like feel like I got some space. So
that.
yeah,
And at least the Helsinki-London flights are always like back to the full, like there are no empty seats ever. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
even though there are so many of those in a day, like Helsinki-London.
yeah. That's why I totally find it impressive that you are reading and doing your dissertation work on the plane. I mean, that is impressive. And I would have thought very highly of you as well if I was on the plane and saw you doing that. I'd be like, "Who's this guy? He's very focused and erudite."
Yeah, and again, that bachelor's dissertation was about like the connection between U.S. foreign policy and their national debt accumulation. So
Oh,
yeah,
oh,
because
that
obviously
sounds really interesting.
they spend so much on wars and military and stuff. So and obviously they
Mm,
have a huge debt issue. So obviously it's gonna affect a lot when so much of your budget is wasted on that. So, yeah.
mm, mm. Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because there's a transfer of wealth issue in there too, right? Because you finance the wars, and then the contractors who provide that are private contractors. So there's like a transfer of wealth, right? This tax money is being spent this way, and then it's getting transferred to private means and profit. So you got some transfer of wealth issues probably going on there as well. That's connected.
I remember in the Brown University, which is a pretty famous university, they have like a or like cost of war like institute or something like that. So I use that a lot as reference. I remember, but yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah,
very
anyway,
cool.
yeah. Anyway, back to films. Um, so should we get into the top 10 part maybe soon? So
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
yeah. So didn't you say that you don't have the top 10 or or what? Like
Yeah, we can start with your 10. I mean, I have the films we talked about and watched
yeah,
listed. It's going to be hard to pick 10, but
yeah,
I will try. But you can start with yours.
yeah. No, well, number 10 is Lenotti Bianchi, again, the Visconti
Okay. Yeah.
film again. Absolutely love that one. It's one of my favorite Italian films, and I think the discussion we had was quite good, if I remember correctly. And obviously, I talked about a little bit about the Dostoevsky short story as well, as I had just read it. And that's a film that's often kind of lingering on my mind. Those beautiful shots in the canals and stuff. It just really
That's a
gets
good.
stuck in your head. And again, the plot is just kind of made for me that kind of a tragic love thing. I love those types of stories more than anything else. So yeah,
Yeah, I love Leno TV actually. I think that's great, and it probably. I think I probably would. I mean, yeah, that would probably factor in my top 10. I think, yeah, as well, just because it's right up my alley too. So you just. I think you also understand what I enjoy. So that one was just perfect. Yeah.
and actually a couple of days ago, I finally watched my Masters of Cinema Blu-ray of Visconti's Conversation piece, which was
Oh
okay
yeah, I
one of
saw
his
that.
kind of more underrated films, but I really enjoyed that. And Burt Lancaster was such a highlight in that film. So yeah.
Yeah, I have that, but I haven't watched it yet. But I saw that you logged it, and I was like, oh, that's really cool that you saw Conversation Piece. As
Yeah.
you know, Visconti, I'm a Visconti fan, so
And then my number 9 is the animated film that we talked about, The Silent Voice, as it is probably my favorite animated movie, again, due to the personal connection to the themes and the stories.
mm,
And we went
yeah,
very deep in that film. Again, I think we discussed Conan the Barbarian, Silent Voice, and Bittersweet Life together. So
yeah, what a combo! Yeah, that was quite a combo. Yeah,
yeah, I
I
think
think
it
so.
was like after your Bulgarian trip, like straight after that. So,
Silent Voice is great. Uh, I will think about whether that would. Does that make the top 10? I don't know yet, because that's another. It's a great one. Mm. Okay, let's see. Let's see where else you're going.
now I'll have to check my list. Those I remembered off the top of my head, but I have it open here. Well, number 8 is Satyricon,
Yeah,
which I know you loved. You said it's a masterpiece. So, yeah.
yeah, and I really want to watch it again.
And that
Yeah,
was one of the hardest films to discuss, or if not the hardest.
I mean it's an insane film to even
Yeah,
watch. Like when you have no like I was just thinking like you said right. If someone watches that for their first Fellini, they would just be completely. Oh man, yeah, but I really want to watch it again now that I'm watching more Fellini. I'm like I'm very curious. Like this film is very yeah. I really want to watch it. I keep thinking about certain images from the film are like burned in my brain, and I keep thinking about them and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I probably would put. But I think Satyricon I would put in the top
yeah.
10 as yeah as well. My own.
I think this next one would probably be in your top 10 as well. It's Ozu's An Autumn Afternoon. So,
Oh well. Yeah.
okay, one of his best films, if not his best. So,
And I really enjoyed that discussion
yeah,
because I was like I don't know how to talk about Ozu. Like I
yeah,
was already appreciating his work because I'd seen Early Spring as well, just not too long ago before that. I didn't know how to talk about. I was like, how will we talk about Ozu? I was amazed that we did talk about Ozu and we even put the work in the time and the place and the obviously I'm no I have no great knowledge of Japanese even modern history and society. I'm really going by what I in a very uh, simplistic way understand about what the dynamics were at that time. So I think that was really a revelation. Great film to experience, amazing film, touching film, and but our ability to actually discuss it was really nice. It left me with a really good feeling.
yeah. I think his films are hard to discuss as well, beyond like the very simple things about, yeah, it's about the generational differences and
Yeah, yeah,
changing
yeah.
society and family dynamics, but it's really hard to go like really beyond that.
Mhm.
And then his films kind of start to blend in your head as well. So it can be hard to make like very specific comments unless you just watch the film. So yeah,
Yeah,
but yeah, number 6 is Tarkovsky's Stalker. Obviously, it has to be in the top 10, and that I think was one of our best discussions as well as was the nostalgia discussion. That was great. So we
yeah,
really went deep with many different types of themes, whether it was the political or more the psychoanalytical. And yeah,
yeah. And I thought about that, and I was like, okay, if I have to do a top 10, do I take up two spots and then put both on there, Stalker
yeah,
and Nostalgia, or I just pick one? Um, yeah, I think Stalker was a great discussion. Uh, Nostalgia was also a great discussion. So, hmm, yeah. Either I'd put both in, but if I had to just pick one or over the other, I would put in Nostalgia just because I think we went a little extra with that one. It felt like some, yeah, it just, even when it came out of it, it didn't, to me, I had this sense of, did we really just, even me, did I actually say those things, and did I, right, like analyze something that way? So continue.
Yeah, 5 is La Chinoise. Okay, my favorite Godard film. So
That is a film that you really challenged me, when I'm glad it did. And then, yeah, I kept, yeah, I had to think about it. I had to watch some commentary. I really had to, yeah, because that is it's a great departure if you're just looking for narrative and all that, even though it has a narrative, but the way it comes about and all the layers, and even to the point where he goes in with the colors and everything like that, which you can see in Contempt now. It's like I was watching Contempt, I was like, oh yeah, he is doing that in the style. He was doing that in La Chinoise as well, with the sets and the background colors and the French colors, the flag colors, and all that. So yeah.
yeah, that's hard to discuss also because there are just so many references into philosophy and literature and stuff. So I think as time goes on and I learn more and more about the references and get into them, the film will open itself up to me even more. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and we were talking about Shakespeare earlier, so this year maybe you'll watch the Shakespeare adaptation of King Lear by Godard. So.
Yeah. But I'm gonna read King Lear before. So. But obviously Godard's King Lear is gonna be completely different.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
has
you're
nothing to
gonna be
do with
like, yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah.
yeah. And then number 4 is another French film. It's The Nun by Jacques Rivette. So obviously we talked about 2 Rivette films, but I prefer Nun to Celine and Julie go boring. So.
I prefer the Nun to Celine and Julie go boating. And Rivette is tough. I will say, for me, Rivette is tough because I'm not fully in tune. But yeah, the Nun, yeah, definitely. I enjoyed that, and of course, I saw Joan the Maid, which I think the Nun and Joan the Maid actually talk to each other as films, and it's a historic period and all that. I think that was great. Uh, but yeah, Celine and Julian Go Boating is difficult, and I will see when I can revisit that, or maybe I need to see other Rivette and then go back to Celine and Julia.
But Celine and Julie is more of his kind of normal style, and The Nun is more of a departure from his normal style.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then number 3 is 3 Iron by Kim Ki-duk. Contemporary cinema doesn't really get better than that. So.
Yeah, 3 Irons, fantastic. And by the way, you're kind of doing a blended rating, like based on the film, the experience rewatching it, and the discussion.
Well, this top 10 is just how much I like the films, but
Okay, yeah.
Because obviously it is like, even though I had seen all of these films before, but obviously due to rewatching and discussing them, my mind on them shifts a little bit as well. So.
Okay, I wonder where
but 3 Iron was also like a great discussion. I think we went very deeply on it and talked about all the kind of political and psychological and everything themes on it. And yeah, so number 2 was possibly our best discussion in my opinion. So it's Heroic Purgatory by Kichu Yoshida, and again one of my top 20 films of all time. And I was very nervous about talking about that film, as it is one of the absolute hardest films or more difficult films I've ever watched. But I was very much blown away how much we got out of it with our discussion. I think it was one of our longest discussions.
Yeah, it's crazy, yeah.
As well, and I brought Freud and everything into that. Yeah, it was a great discussion.
Yeah, and a great film. Yeah. Okay. And number 1?
Well, it was our very first discussion, Fox and his friends. So.
Wow. Okay.
as it is one of my top 10 films of all time. So.
I mean, I'm amazed you came up with a top 10, given all that's not on the top 10, right?
Yeah.
Like No Life of Oharu,
Yeah, that would have
no,
been 11th or 12th.
yeah, yeah,
And the return would have.
no Coreda, um, yeah, wow,
No Conan the Barbarian.
no Conan. Forget that. No From Paris with Love. I thought you were gonna troll
Oh, yeah,
hard
I
and make
forgot.
that
I
number
forgot
one.
about that.
I thought you were gonna make that number one. I thought you were gonna troll hard. You're just gonna be like,
Royale
"That's
with
number
cheese.
one." That
Yeah.
that was the best one I watched. That was the best one out of all of them. My God. Yeah, I'm amazed that you were able to do this because yeah, because I would find it very difficult to do this, but I would have to kind of. I guess okay, at number 10, I would include Like Father, Like Son. Like Son was really great, and I think it's completed our general discussion of Koreeda's three films overall. So I think okay, I'd go with that, and it's just a great film and builds on the themes. Although I don't know, Malbaros is so great, and So Walking is so great. Um, I will put Workmeister Harmonies. Um, I would put. See, I loved La Notte Bianchi, so I would, if I'm just to put one between La Notte Bianchi and A Special Day. Ooh, uh, okay, I'll put A Special Day. But I don't know, right? But I'll put A Special Day. Um, yeah, like I said, Heroic Purgatory for sure. It just has to be. It's just something else. Um, I already said I would do Nostalgia. Yeah, I will do Three Iron as well because that is just. I mean, that totally surprised me as a film because, yeah, there was a way that you described it in the general synopsis, but as an experience, it's well beyond what you can say in terms of a synopsis and a plot. Fox and His Friends, yeah, definitely Fox and His Friends. And there has to be ozone here, so you have to go with Autumn Afternoon. And I'm probably doing something egregious and leaving something crazy out.
Well, you have to leave out because they were just most of the films are masterpieces. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I got two left. I'm gonna go with. Okay, I'm gonna put Life of Oharu.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna put number one is Fellini Satiricon.
Yeah.
That's the way I'm gonna go. So yeah, Like Father, Like Son, Workmeister Harmonies, A Special Day, Heroic Purgatory, Nostalgia, Three Iron, Fox and His Friends, An Autumn Afternoon, Life of Oharu, and Fellini Satiricon. But I think it could be arranged in different ways as well. I'm sad to leave out Uzak. I'm sad to leave out The Return because I think The Return was just mind blowing. I absolutely loved that movie. Um, it's such a masterpiece. It's just so great. Its imagery, its style, what it was about. I'm like, I keep thinking about that movie. So
Royale with cheese.
yeah, exactly. So that was just fantastic too. But yeah, sad to leave so many out. But I think yeah, we're more or less aligned.
And I
Yeah,
kind of noticed that the more complex the film was, the better the discussion of them, even though we were more nervous about them. So.
yeah, we both didn't sleep the night before, or we had weird
Yeah.
dreams, worried about what we're gonna say. But yeah.
But the From Paris with Love discussion was great as well. We kind of
Yeah.
overanalyzed the film and the politics.
Oh yeah, we went crazy on that one. Yeah, I mean that was fun. Conan the Barbarian was a lot of fun too. It makes me want to watch that again as well.
And
Um,
the sequel, we need to
yeah,
watch
yeah,
them.
yeah. Conan the Barbarian was crazy, and someone, yeah, it was Professor Sky, and he was like talking about, was he talking about GNX or whatever? And then he gave that scene. He described that scene that we were laughing about, where the vulture comes and is
Yeah.
trying to, and he just grabs him, and he was describing that scene, and I was laughing so hard because I was like, oh yeah, we watched this movie this year, and we were laughing so hard about that scene, right, where Arnold's just staring
Yeah.
at the thing and just, yeah.
Yeah, I did finally listen to GNX like after I made my latest video. And yeah, I haven't listened to it enough to digest it fully, but it's a good album.
Well, and
But
I
again,
need to listen to Chromacopia because I haven't listened to that, embarrassingly. Um, so so yeah.
and yesterday I listened to the new Lupe Fiasco album. So that was good.
Yeah, I haven't listened to that. I started listening to Absol. It's also a really good soul burger. Um, but yeah, again, if I listen to that, then I don't listen to other things. So it's like, you know, it's hard to fit it all in.
Yeah. But my favorite hip hop album of the year so far is the new JPEG Mafia. But yeah,
I haven't listened to that yet. I need to listen to it. I haven't listened to that yet. No, because I like the last one you recommended.
yeah.
So yeah, crazy year.
And then we
Crazy
were
year.
talking about that. Maybe we talk about kind of what we learned from the podcast, if we learned anything. So, well, I can start. So I think one thing I learned is that how much easier it is to analyze films, like when you talk to somebody and not when you aren't on your own. Because I noticed that again, the best analysis comes when we were discussing the film and then building the analysis piece by piece and putting the puzzle pieces together. So I really noticed how much I feel like I'm way smarter when I'm talking to somebody than when I'm on my own. So it's just kind of something like that communal experience or whatever kind of gets something out of me that I don't get when I'm on my own and making my own videos or something.
Absolutely. I mean, of course. I think just the dialogue was way more fun than I ever had, like, making a video and, talking about a film I watched, because like you said, it builds, and I just getting some, because sometimes you would say things and I would be like, oh, I didn't think about that, and I just enjoy that feeling so much, that you would just say something and I'd be like, wow, yeah, right. Like that's something to think about. Like that's so interesting. And there's so many moments like that. Like for example, in our Fox and Friends discussion, okay, Workmeister harmonies, like you said, nostalgia. There was tons of nostalgia. Was insane. Um, but Fellini, Satyricon, and so I was like, it's rewarding to have that uh, discussion and dialogue, because that's what it's about. It's not about just liking, experiencing, or watching, but it's about the sharing, and the sharing matters, because this podcast to me uh, felt like the better version of what I enjoyed in uni as well, when you would have discussion groups and you would actually break things apart, and then you would see how each person is kind of viewing certain things, and and having opinions. So that was definitely, like you said, very enjoyable. One thing I learned from your selection of films is this aspect that, okay, there are different streams of consciousness. So first is the stream of consciousness of the creator and the stream of consciousness of the world of the film. And there's a lot going on uh, in these and there's the stream of consciousness that's you. Uh, and there's a lot going on when you watch a film. And that's why immediately just being focused on those things that we were talking about, whether it's self-indulgent or this and these kinds of ideas, um, take away from the fact that what you really need to do is be able to let go, to kind of surrender. Like, Satyricon was a perfect example of this, because there's something Fellini is trying to explore, and then there's a world of what he's exploring, and then there's yours, and yours could be related to, well, epics as they've been told to us, or history has been told to us, without, and how much is being excluded. And when someone is bringing that all into the fold, uh, it's going to go against what you're used to seeing as a structure for telling that kind of history or story. But it's nonetheless uh, super worthwhile to experience and to think about. And the other thing is that I really enjoyed through watching my films, on the ones I was watching on mine, plus what we were watching in these films that are trying to explore artifice in cinema, that are very making you aware that you are watching a production, you are watching something that's very much constructed, and something that's very much wants to uh, pull you in certain directions. Uh, and what does it mean, you know? And also being into the narrative, but into the filmmaking part of it as well. So.
And of course, we talked about the stream of consciousness stuff a lot when we talked about some of the albums as well, like the free jazz stuff, for example. I think we talked about it, and I remember I even brought up free jazz when we talked about Heroic Purgatory, because that's a perfect example of a stream of consciousness experience. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed the kind of stream of consciousness kind of structure of our podcast that we, again, I didn't usually have much idea what I wanted to talk about before the podcast, but then the stream of consciousness started flowing and we came up with lots of points every time, no matter how nervous we were. So that's great. And of course, in my own videos, even I usually have the stream of consciousness approach, which sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't, because I don't really plan out my videos. I just put the camera on and start discussing, and sometimes it's very surface level and stupid, and sometimes I say something profound. So it kind of shows the duality of man, the failures and the good times. So, yeah.
Well, I never found anything you were saying to be simplistic, so you're definitely being hard on yourself. But yes, I was surprised by that aspect as well. Like you said, like very few notes, and you just kind of show up, and goes to show you, like, you don't know what might come out from a conversation. And obviously, great philosophers already were saying that, right? Formulating their works in a form of dialogue and conversation, because I think, yes, we grow in conversation. And yeah, thank you for all the inspiration. Yeah, it was inspiring. Like, it really, made me want to explore and keep going and learn more. And yeah, so.
And this is the type of stuff I've been kind of craving for my whole life, basically, because it's really hard to find people in real life who want to have a more complex discussion. Usually they just want to talk about, like, oh, how was your day at work and things like that, and it's not very interesting, especially in the long run. So I'm really happy that I've been able to talk to both you and Tony in the past year or so, and I mean, with you, we've talked. I mean, it's been over a year, but with Tony, we started our discussions in January this year, so it's almost a year. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also learned something that's unsettling as well, which is that how much the world is moving away from what we
Yeah.
kind of are doing, or what we are, what we embarked on with this podcast. Because yes, longer format, more discussion, more analysis is not really sound bites is where it's at. So that can be a bit unsettling too, because what really happens when these things are a sound bite? Because like we discussed, I mean, watching all these films, what I also realized, there's a point I like because it becomes a stream of consciousness of all these films, and they're like working on you. But then you don't want to go so far as they completely disappear, and it's just a number. And I watched it, and I remember it being great, versus keeping pieces of that with you. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think what kind of relates to this is that in booktube community lately, people have been talking about like anti-intellectualism
Oh yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
lot,
right.
because apparently in TikTok there are some people who say that why are there so many words in this page? Then they skip like whole paragraphs when they read books, and they only read the dialogue and stuff like that. It's absolutely insane that you are reading books, but I don't want to read this Tolstoy's description, so I'm gonna skip it and I'll just read the dialogue.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That's so vulgar. Yeah.
Yeah, this shortcut. I mean, you're right. Like this shortcut approach to everything, right? I want to, yeah, kind of get to a certain point so I can say I have all this under my belt, and you know, I know this. And it's like, but you don't know it. And I think, you know, that's the whole thing. And I think with us, we're on the same page. So it's, and I think whoever's listening is probably like same page. So it's like preaching to the choir. But yeah, that you don't know it. I think that's the other thing to learn is you don't know it. Like, okay, we talked about nostalgia and we had a great discussion, or any other film take from our list that we've discussed, but we don't know it yet. And we won't know it. It's going to change on us. It's going to grow on us. It's going to go. So it's to skip over and say, oh yeah, well, and that's just like, you're watching a movie, and so I'm just going to skip the scene. Like, why? Why do I need to watch this particular scene? And this scene. Okay, I got it. I got what's happening in the scene, and then so that, like you said, the experiential thing is being skipped. But I think that's what cinema's gift was, the experiential, other than just the experiential that's thrills and excitement and entertainment, but the experimental, like experiential of being in the skin of things, of experiencing something, or imagining or thinking about things that you could, that are mind-boggling. What was it actually like, if you were born of a certain class in Rome? Like, what would you experience around you? What would the superstition look like? What would like the animal sacrifice look like? What would the behaviors look like? What would the thought process look like? And right, um, yeah,
Yeah, I can to a certain extent still like sympathize with these anti-intellectuals, because again, I'm not a great reader either. I have some attention span problems, and sometimes I take too long of a break from reading and stuff, so I can sympathize with some of those things. But if I read a book, I'm gonna read the whole book and not skim around it. And another part of this is that again, the new Christopher Nolan movie was just announced, and it's an adaptation of Homer's Odyssey. So social media has been full of comments where people say that they've never heard of Homer's Odyssey. Like how is that possible? It's as famous as the Bible, basically. So
yeah, yeah,
you've never heard of it, and it has influenced like absolutely everything that came out since. But No, I've never heard of Odyssey. Like I had heard of it before I started school because I watched the Odyssey cartoon when I was a kid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's hard to understand, but yeah, I think we are like limited in our, like you said, yeah, attention problems and also volume. If there's a lot and we're just pulled in different directions regularly and constantly, it's what is gonna cause that as well, right? Because it's like you don't really know. Well, how do you discern? I mean, we could have a whole dialogue about this, but how do you discern what's good and what's not, and what's worthwhile and what's not? And then, like you said, it's not just like the anti-intellectual, but it's this anti-intellectualism, and everyone's seeing that as that that's a form of authoritarianism. Like someone is telling me, prescribing, and yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say about this, but I don't have such a problem if someone says to me, these are great films, but there's a lot of me and individual, and I will decide, and I like this, so what, and then I think there's a huge misunderstanding, right? Because it's like you feel like someone's telling you there's something wrong with what you like, and I think I never in my personal journey saw it that way. I just said, yeah, but if there's more to explore, there's more to explore, right? So um, it's not bad, and you can disagree if you want, but if we get into this point where tons of opinion, tons of content, tons of this, tons of that, how do you? I mean, how do you ever get to an Odyssey then? Maybe you hear about it eventually, but you're never gonna read it. And I'm not saying anything judgmental because I haven't read the Odyssey, so that's one of my things that I actually would like to read it. But like you said, it takes time, it takes concentration, and it takes sacrifice now, right? Because there are things you can't do if you're going to spend time with the Odyssey.
Yeah, and again, I think we've talked about this before, but canons are important. While obviously there are many problems that they have, like sometimes they are too westernized and don't take into account the global south or the eastern countries, the Asian countries. But I think still canons have a place, and if a book has survived in the conversation for hundreds of years, it's probably because it's really good and not because of some like establishment conspiracy or something like that. And again, there's a place to be anti-authority and anti-establishment. I'm very much like that myself, but I also know when I should listen to somebody, and if somebody is an expert, an art historian or whatever, they probably know something about the field, and you should listen to them. You shouldn't be contrarian just for the sake of contrarian. You can be a contrarian when it makes sense to be a contrarian, but it doesn't always make sense to be contrarian. And sometimes you need to listen to people who know more than you.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's kind of very arrogant if you think that, oh, yeah, I'm just a special individual. I'm just going to learn everything myself and I'm never going to listen to anybody else. Like humbleness is, or being humble is a virtue. So you could use that mindset sometimes and lessen that arrogant attitude. But I could learn from that myself. I'm sometimes arrogant, and I've sometimes said that being humble is a weakness, but I said that in a more cheeky way
Yeah,
and
of course.
not a serious way.
Of course,
It's
of
just
course.
kind of
Yeah,
like when I say
yeah,
that, yeah, I'm an intellectual snob.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's a
yeah,
joke. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Mass morality and all that. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, yes, of course. Um, I understand the place where it comes from, and I similar like um, agree as well because yeah, when you say certain things, it can be taken the wrong way, and just the same thing. Like the one of the learnings or one of the points of this podcast was not that we're coming from a place where it's like we know, it's a place of we we don't know and we want to wrestle, right? We want to play around with what we are um, taking in, and I think that's the point. The point is not any definitive comment on this film and this is about here and this is definitely there and oh okay, uh, you know, this issue and that issue, and it's not that. It's a playing around. So you are engaging with what you are. Uh, I don't like this word like consuming, and I don't. I'm actually not even a huge fan of the term physical media, if I'm to be honest, because I'm like things have names. You know, this is a Blu-ray, right? This is a book. This is a right, but okay, we're in this world, so this is my opinion. Not to upset anyone who's okay, you know, uses those terms, but um, if you read or if you watch or whatever, you should engage. And I think this, what I learned from this podcast as well, to bring it back to the learnings, is that when I was just when I'm watching on my own, okay, I'm watching, but it becomes more like consumption. I'm watching and I'm okay, I think about it a little bit and it stays with me and stuff. But there was a there was a satisfaction to really engaging it in the way we did with each film that made me feel more satisfied, that I was like, okay, I'm actually processing the art, the vision and all that, you know, and I'm trying to grasp it, I'm trying to understand it. That doesn't mean I understood it because we discussed it once, but I like the process of being giving, um, honoring that much by being able to process it. And I think this goes to your point as well, that you're saying we're not saying that this is bad, this is good, and all that. Like you said, contemporary versus historic, you know, older and classic and all this. But we are saying that evaluate what you're kind of into in terms of the level of engagement beyond the just, okay, I watched it, I had a good time, or what's the next one? Because some of these things are meant to be showstoppers a little bit, right? Like you said with Tarkovsky, like Stalker or something like that. It's meant to be a showstopper a little bit. It's meant to make you pause The Virgin Spring. It's meant to make you pause Persona. And if there's no pause and it's just like on to the next, then you're a little bit, what does that mean overall? That's for you as a person as well. So I think I struggle with that myself. So I'm not sitting there and saying as a critique, but it's something I wrestle with. So I'm just putting the question out there as well.
And I think one important virtue that we can have as people that maybe is kind of underrated in a way is curiosity.
Mm.
Because I think that, again, I'm not that intelligent as a person, but one of my strengths is that I'm just endlessly curious about
Mm-hmm.
so many different things. So that's like that desire to learn more about your passions and always increase your knowledge. I think that's very important and can get you far with these things if you just want to learn. It's not always about your base intelligence, but sometimes it's just your willingness to learn. And I think, again, one of the things I've also learned from this podcast is like why I like about this, why I like these films and why I'm into these types of films. Because when we really break them down, you kind of learn a lot about yourself as well. That why is my taste like this? Yeah,
Mm.
sometimes when you just watch the films and don't discuss them, yeah, you love them, but you don't. I always know why. But after doing these hour-long discussions, yeah, you notice that, oh yeah, this is why this film really connects with me, and it's very rewarding to learn that and do a bit of that kind of self-reflection while you discuss these films. As again, self-reflection is one of my favorite things to do in general. So.
Absolutely. And yeah, connected learning to that for me is take a chance on things, because yeah, from when you said, oh, let's have a, you know, discussion, and we started with The Sopranos and all these things, it was about taking a chance on it, right? Because at the end of the day, um, you know, for us, like, yeah, we're coming from different places. We're also, of a different age. You're younger. I'm older than you, and then there are people older than me. But um, taking chance on things and then dialoguing, right? And then you kind of realize that these are the conversations that are important and are lacking, because you do have a little bit of this. I talk to people of my age group or my particular cohort, particular generation, and then, but there's a lot to be gained when you go. So, like you said, that to me, that's the part of the humility as well, is that I'm talking to you. You know, you're 20 years or whatever younger than me, but I'm learning from you. So who you're going to learn from and who's going to inspire you does not have to be one direction or another or a certain source. It can come from these conversations and being open to the conversations, because there are many things that you've challenged me with even this year with certain films, right? Where I've had to be um, open and say, okay, I'm out of my depth here with this because I just don't know what to make of it. I'm just not. It's just something I don't know what to make of. But like you said, you keep that curiosity. You also keep it for another day. You don't just stop and say, well, okay, I didn't know what to make of it that time, so I never want to deal with that again, because I see that too. I never want to experience something like that again. And it's like, how do you know that? Like, you don't know that. It's too short of a sample to know, too small of a sample to know. So yeah, it's been great. Yeah, it's been one of the very positive things of my year, if not the most positive thing of my year.
Yeah,
It's been doing
definitely for
this.
me.
Yeah,
And the year otherwise was very kind of average. But yeah, this was one positive thing. These and the discussions with Tony. So
yeah,
as like I said earlier, I just love having these long discussions on things that I'm interested in. So it's
yeah,
like surprisingly rare in real life. Okay, all people don't realize it, because some people are obviously lucky that they have a big friend group who have like similar interests, but it can be so hard to find that in
yeah.
real
It is
life,
hard.
especially with this niche interest, because even like again art house films, and there aren't that many people who are into them, or classic literature or philosophy or whatever. Okay, most people aren't into things like that. So, and even most readers, they are into like young adult fantasy fiction and things like that I'm not that into. But
Yeah. See, all this discussion, and we didn't even get into the state of physical media. So
yeah, well, we can talk about it a little bit now. So, yeah, is Criterion still the best label or whatever?
yeah,
Because there are lots of talk that again, they're like, for example, the 4K prints are worse than with other labels because they don't use the HDR. And I mean, I don't really know about that technical stuff about myself, but I've just heard other people talk about
yeah. I mean, I don't know. To be honest, I'm like I never feel kind of fit to comment on those kinds of things, because the grading obviously is a kind of information when you do HDR and all that stuff, that your system is going to communicate certain things to your system to adjust light and all these kinds of things. And then given what your TV is and what your even what your player is and stuff like that, and what it's capable to do, uh, it will either enhance your experience or not. It can ruin it too, because certain TVs don't uh, interpret it well, and I guess that's where Dolby Vision came and all these kinds of things. So I'm not an expert again, but Nostalgia 4K from Kino, that's not HDR, and it's not Dolby Vision. It's just a straight up 4K. Um, Looks amazing. What that adds and what that doesn't add, I don't know. It can add things. It can also ruin things as well, because sometimes there can be smoothing effects and stuff like that that actually make it look more artificial. So I don't know. It's subjective, and it's whatever people are into. I think I'm curious on all formats, because it's like, okay, I watched Diary of a Chambermaid, but I watched the Criterion DVD, and I thought it was like quite good. I was like impressed. I was like, okay, I sit there and think DVD was this terrible, terrible. Well, because you like to think, okay, progression, and it's always better, and it's always this, and yes, of course, it's going to be more detailed. The scan is going to improve and stuff like that. But is Diary of a Chambermaid unwatchable on DVD, or is Coup de Torchon unwatchable on DVD? Not at all. You'll be surprised by how good it looks, and how you can watch it and appreciate it. And you know better than anyone because you're not a format snob at all. So you'll watch it anyway you get to watch it, even online, which I don't do as much as you do, or I don't do nearly at all, going to the rare film and all that kind of stuff. So I think these things are. I think for certain people they're of super interest, and maybe that knocks Criterion down. I think another thing can maybe knock Criterion down is if you look at the selections, which ones. Remember we discussed. We said it'd be interesting to look at each kind of 100 releases throughout the spying number history and see what were the particular interests. I think, yes, you do see that the interest and focus is changing a bit. It does make you concerned as to will they bother with certain titles in the back catalog to ever go from even DVD to a Blu-ray? Probably not. And where might it go in terms of the overall balance? I don't know that either, but is it still the best label? I think so as a whole. It still manages to be, because there are things other labels do. Certain labels do really well, like Curzon's doing really well with these retrospective sets of like Wim Wenders and Bellatar and all this. They're doing a fantastic. I mean, the Bellatar set is a stunning set, and it's amazing to have those films. And then Radiance is bringing out some things here and there that you wouldn't, no one's paying attention, because on a smaller scale, when you're doing something, you're able to do something that you can't do if you're investing to move a larger amount of copies. But then that creates FOMO. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No, yeah, no, first of all, the formatting. So yeah, I care less and less about formats. The older I get, again, I just care about the films. But of course, the film discourse here on YouTube is very much dominated about the formats instead of the films. It's all about the, hey, I have this plastic case here. I'm not gonna say anything about the film. I'm just gonna show this and tell you that I have it, and that's it. And I'm very much against that kind of vulgarized version of film discourse and how it's only made to feel like a consumerist thing, but it just shows the times we live in. But yeah, I'm kind of very mixed when it comes to the selection, because that's like the most important thing to me, like what films are they releasing. And again, it's kind of like some of the stuff that they've recently released has been like something that I've been really happy about, like Happiness. I wanted that for such a long time, and then I think was the 22nd of December, I watched on Criterion Channel the new restoration of Mother and the Whore, and obviously that was something that I had been looking forward to, and the restoration looked great, so I'm really glad that they brought that. So those were two like kind of holy grail films that I really wanted, and then obviously they released Soy Cuba. So many good films they still release, and I also like that they are again releasing diversity, like from the African American directors and African directors and things like that. I think that's very important, no matter how many people scream woke. Yeah. And it's important to bring those films, and I've watched lots of them, and they've been really good, and they've really helped me to understand that side of cinema as well that I didn't know that much about without Criterion. But then, of course, they are releasing these like again Terry Gilliam films and kind of more and more kind of mainstream Hollywood films, and I'm not really into that anymore, although I obviously understand that they need to have these types of titles to make money to release some of the smaller titles, but still I feel like the balance has shifted a little bit, that they are now releasing more and more of that stuff and less of the rarer stuff, even though they are still releasing the rare stuff. Of course, they released the Demon Bond, which I still want to see, and again, Godard's King Lear. I was very surprised when they announced that. I didn't think that
Yeah,
they would
that was a
ever.
shocking one. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think they would ever release again another Godard film besides like a re-release of the ones that they already had. So that kind of gave me some hope. And then there've been lots of other interesting titles as well. But so I think they are overall doing a good job still in terms of the film selection, but I think it isn't as good as it used to be in the peak times, and I hope that the balance doesn't shift that much further to the mainstream, but it might. But we'll see how the landscape looks, because of course many other labels have done this too, like Arrow, that they've gone full on the horror garbage, and then Eureka has gone full on the kung fu dude pro stuff and less and less art house
Yeah.
films. So they, of course, they have to think that what are people gonna buy. So often I also complain about the mindset of the consumers instead of these companies, because obviously sometimes people of course complain about the news as well, that why are they talking about this celebrity gossip and stuff like that. Well, they are talking about it because people are reading it instead of like Lebanese people getting killed or whatever. So it's the consumer in the end who decides these things to a large degree. So
Yeah, absolutely. And they're also, yeah, and there are always going to be, you know, different things that you can question as well. Like in Criterion, like you can say you get an enemy of a fall and it's direct to the collection, but you get Evil Does Not Exist and About Dry Grasses and they're Janus contemporaries. And I saw this year About Dry Grasses and Evil Does Not Exist. And I haven't seen Anatomy of a Fall, so I'm not judging that. And I'm not saying that that's not a great film. But you know, if you have a question, you're like, you don't have any Chelan yet, right? If you're gonna go and get some contemporary in there, like we even talked about The Return, right? And then there's also the rights issues. Okay, The Return and all these might be attached with Kino and Kino like partner labels that have the Zivjang and stuff movies and stuff. But I didn't understand that. I was like, evil, So there's that, distinction they're making between what's a Janus contemporary and what's immediately into Criterion. And yeah, no one can sit there and say, well, there might not be a numbers issue there, because you are going to put in investment to make it a spine number, right? You're going to invest in extras and all that kind of stuff, and it's got to sell. And it's got to grab people. So those things are always going to exist, and there's no way that you can do that to the full satisfaction of what you and I maybe would want in that. But I think you're also right that, yeah, you have to move away from. You got to become format agnostic if you're really interested in the film, because this week, okay, I watched the Blood Wedding from the Sarah Eclipse set, and it's amazing, it's wonderful, uh, it's just a transformative experience to watch something like that. Super important to film, I think, because yeah, as we were talking about, the idea of performance and recording performance, and then what they're performing in all these different layers. Like you've commented many times, Inception, dream within a dream within a dream. Like, okay, yeah, but do you realize that also exists in so much film? You just don't know. So there's those layers that even in something like Sora is doing with that. Are you going to see that in a Blu-ray ever? Are you going to ever see that in a 4K? Probably not. And this Eclipse may be the last way, because even if you look at online, I don't know what yours. You're more savvy with that. You might not find it anywhere to watch in the future. And so I know there's a lot of critique or commentary about losing certain films to streaming, and streaming changing hands. Okay, it's going to go over to Amazon, and it's going to go over to Netflix, and then it's going to, yeah, you might have some hassle doing that with some of those films. Subscribe here, watch it, then it moves there. Okay, but I don't think those are the films that are really the concern about being lost. I think it's things like this, like you said, like I've always loved you, as we discussed in our recent discussion. You know, it's there on YouTube. How long will it be there? Will it be there? Right? Like these, there are things that are true risk of being lost, or the last way you're ever going to see it is DVD. So if you're going to sit there and say, I only watch 4K and I only watch Blu-ray, well, you're never going to see that. And maybe some people say, I don't care if I don't ever see that. But you and I care. So we're coming from a certain perspective in relation to that.
Yeah, I think that Carlos Saura film is one of Tony's favorites,
It's
and he
beautiful.
has been able to see it somewhere online, so it must be somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm sure it is. So I'm not saying it's entirely like gone, but I'm saying that, yeah, there are a few ways. You can search for it online, or okay, certain DVDs. So I'm not. Whenever we talk about these kind of areas, it's more like, okay, what are you talking about, right? DVD in relation in relation to what, right? Um, I don't know. Kinds of kindness. Should you get the DVD? I don't know, because you're probably better off doing the Blu-ray, right? That kind of thing. But Saros, if you want it physical, yeah, and like you said, it's online. Like we were talking about Charisma, it's online, but how long for? And when it's gone, where will you find it next? So if there's a Charisma DVD anywhere, maybe you do keep that, right? Or like we talked about Angelopolis, and when is Angelopolis going to get Blu-rays and 4Ks, or is Curzon ever going to do one of these for Angelopolis? I hope so. Uh, Even though I haven't seen his work yet, and I'm going to explore it this coming year, but I'm just saying, yeah, it's relative what we're talking. Depends on the context, and I think you and I often discuss in a very different context than what the common discourse is about.
Yeah, I think physical media, there is that addiction side to it that okay, some
Yeah,
people have recently talked about as well, because I don't think it necessarily makes sense to just stick to one format. It's just yeah, I'm used to it, so I have to do it for the rest of my life. And then there is the point when it kind of becomes something that, oh yeah, I could watch this film 4K on streaming, but I just have to get that special edition because it looks so cool and I want to have it gathering dust on my shelf. How am I gonna live with myself if I don't have it on my shelf? Again, I've tried to also obsess about physical media less myself. I've recently just been buying books and stuff because with books, I think I really prefer reading physical, but with films, I don't think it really makes much difference whether I push or click a couple of things on the computer or whether I put the disc on the player. So,
so I mean, I agree, and maybe I am one of those people that certain special editions, I would say, for me, but there might not be the same ones for others. That, yeah, I do kind of think, okay, do I really want to not have that? Like I went back and forth a lot about the Buñuel, because I was like, okay, it's perfectly fine to watch even on DVD online, but the new 4K scans, you know, but then sometimes I sit there and say, well, okay, but I think Buñuel's important. So supporting a 4K scan of Buñuel, and that someone was willing to kind of do it and put it out there is a nice thing as well. So I'm back and forth about that, but I will tell you honestly that what's challenging for me online is that as soon as I'm on looking in an online way, there's so much that I have a hard time kind of narrowing in. So having physical for me, as we've discussed, it's more about also a reminder. Like you said, like you can fall out for a bit and you can forget about things. Um, and this is the thing. The way I see it is, let's say you go somewhere, and then if you're not very curated in the form of narrowing, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go through like all the kind of unique Japanese films that Criterion Channel has, and so anytime I want to watch something, that's what I'm gonna go and do. For me, I go there and I'll say, okay, what's on Prime? Okay, what's on Disney Plus? Okay, what's on this? And then I get lost in that, and then I'm like, but with this sitting there, it allows me to say, you know what, that Wim Wenders box set needs to you need to go more. Like you've seen this and this and this, but there's still films in there you haven't seen yet, for example. And so, and whenever I think about things, like it also allows me to think about things because of object permanence, right? And I'm not disregarding the addiction side and all that stuff. I'm someone who's very sensitive to those kinds of things. So I'm well aware of that. So I'm not saying, oh yeah, go on and buy all these things. I'm not even advocating point of view. But I'm saying for me, like you're saying with the books, when it's there, you look at your shelf, and your shelf is a reminder of things that are important that you value, or you see it on your shelf and just seeing the title alone can be like, oh yeah, that was a really interesting movie because this and this, I really like this about it, like that about it. Oh well, I wasn't so um, into this part of it, or I need to kind of revisit that, right? But I'm not saying it's going to work that way for everyone. But the object permanence aspect of it works very well for me as someone who is, like I said, on the autism spectrum. So I don't know. Everyone is different in that regard. But I feel conflicted when I hear different views online as well, because everyone has a point. Even when you said like the consumption, addiction, even hoarding aspects of it, you have to think about all those things as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's better to hoard Blu-rays than washing machines, but yeah, that's another topic.
Yeah,
But
and I'm
yeah,
one for those that I agree with you. Like I kind of sit there and say, if you hoarded a bunch of books and the books are quality, and assuming you didn't put yourself in some kind of really precarious situation, is it the worst thing in the world? We can debate on that, and that's why one film that I enjoy a lot is The Music Room, because The Music Room does a great job about describing art addiction, and you can see the complexity of it, of the beauty of what he's valuing and choosing to value and put money towards, but then at the same time his world's eroding and he's not aware. But isn't that what we need art for at times too? Because the world is always going to be the world, as we discussed in I've Always Loved You. There's that fantastic thing she says is the world's always going to be the world, and these concerns are going to be concerns, and they're going to come into being and pass, come into being and pass, but the music is going to last. So, that can tap you into a something about something greater thought than just the day to day. But unfortunately, the problem also is that a lot of people are only watching a certain kind of film, so they see film as they like to collect it, but they also maybe acknowledge a frivolousness to film. But I don't know, like Satin Tango is not frivolous at all. But if you've never seen a film like that and never going to bother with it and don't care to have it in your collection, as opposed to other of those things, I agree. Some of those things are maybe you can see as frivolous because they don't have that enduring quality.
yeah, and you mentioned this bit earlier, but I think the one genuinely good argument for collecting Blu-rays and films in general is that you are supporting the restoration process for these films. So if again we weren't buying Criterion or any of these labels, like how many of these films wouldn't be restored? Of course, sometimes they are restored by like different film institutes and stuff, but often these Blu-ray labels also do restoration. So if, let's say, physical media died tomorrow, like then many films maybe would never be restored. So that's like one, I think, really good argument for physical media and also just supporting your hobbies in general, that if you really love something, you should try to put some money into it so that the thing will continue. But I wanted to also ask you this one question about physical media, that is physical media dying? Again, thousands of people are talking about it on YouTube,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
and I'm still thinking that whether it is dying or or it's not dying.
Yeah, I think. I mean, this is such a um, interesting discussion. Oh, sorry, my headphones are dying. I'm gonna have to just switch up 1 second. Is physical media dying? You said was the question, right? Um, so I think there was some. I think there were some really great videos made when this whole LG thing happened, uh, and I thought like what people were generally saying was great because um, the question is really okay. You have physical media, so how are you going to view it? So let's say you have a player, and then eventually it breaks down. Then what do you do? So like you said, you could get into the washing machine scenario, and you could store a couple of players, but you don't know what storing them is going to do if they're still going to be okay when you take them out and play them in the future. So the real issue is one is okay if you view, what are you going to view it with? But I think people came up with really good comments that it's the same thing with CDs, right? Like you don't have a lot of CD manufacturers now, but you have these boutique or like specialist kind of hi-fi equipment producers, and they produce CD players, so there are fewer of them, but you can still get a CD player, but they're going to be a little more expensive. So, and then the other side of it is like all these labels, are they going to keep producing them? Right? But if you see something like Criterion, which is probably also in a way, given their new acquisition and everything, very much more kind of on the business mind, really going forward, I don't know if it's going to disappear or if it's going to disappear in the near future. But what I think about is, as you are talking about supporting different things, one thing I was thinking about is like, for example, watching Berlin Alexanderplatz and then thinking, well, how amazing is it that it's there? It's on Blu-ray. Someone has done that. They've restored it and put it into such wonderful packaging as Criterion has done. Is no one really talks about how nice of a set that is, Berlin Alexanderplatz, and thinking, okay, what it takes to keep that in circulation, in stock, and in print, right? Because that might not be a very fast-moving item. So overall, as we were talking about Criterion, if you're gonna do the more popular things, but that makes sure that Berlin Alexanderplatz continues to be in circulation and in print, so people can discover it. I think that's a good thing. But yes, there are risks of titles like that then going out of print, like Day for Night went out of print on the Criterion Collection, and that's not the maybe it's one of the more popular new wave titles in director's Truffaut, but that went out of print. So there is I don't know about risk of dying, but there's risk of things that just disappear, and then are they ever going to come back? Is Imamura ever going to come back in the way Eureka put out? Air Mizuguchi set, is that the last Mizuguchi set we'll ever see? Is the one that Eureka did? I mean, those are the things that I think about and wonder if that part is in a way dead and that's the last of it you'll ever see. Um, and that's why I was talking about the Buñuel set. Is that the only time you're really going to see Simon of the Desert in a Blu-ray that's a 4K scan? Probably, because how many people care about Simon of the Desert, right? So I think those are the things I think about in terms of what's dying and not dying, quote unquote.
Yeah, I think again it's not gonna die out completely in the near future, especially not in the 5 to 10 year range. But I think eventually it will completely die out when. But we are talking about probably many decades before that happens. So that's not something that necessarily we have to think about. But that was a good point. That maybe some films like the Misoguchi set and things like that they probably aren't gonna go back, and those things will die out, and that's very sad because it's usually the good stuff that will die out, and then the bad stuff gets released again and again. Like again, Arrow constantly putting out new versions of some garbage horror films that have no artistic merit in them. But then one of the great directors like Mizoguchi is there in the out of print land, and we only have a couple of his most famous films in print. Although fortunately many of his films can be watched on streaming, but still I wish they were more accessible. And with the Blu-ray players, yeah, I also watched some videos about LG stopping to manufacturing them, but of course there are still other manufacturers like Panasonic and that are making them. And I think again, Blu-ray players tend to be something that when you buy one, you don't usually have to buy another one for a long time. These are things that tend to last for a long time, at least for me. Every time I've bought something like this, I've had them for many years. And then there will be probably good second-hand market and things like that. And maybe there will be like those specialty Blu-ray players like there are with vinyl, like you said. But yeah, it seems like there might be, it might be like film on physical media might be a bit of a trendy thing for like the near future, but then it will probably die out at some point. But I'm kind of weirded out how obsessed people are about this topic. It feels like there's a new video about this every day on YouTube, and so many people just make videos and on about this, and they always say the same points. But yeah, it's of course gonna be very sad if it totally dies out at some point. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and it's like uh, it's whether you look at something like very literally, like, so I like your perspective, right? In the sense that you watch stuff online, and I look at it similar like you. If I can watch it still and it's available, that's fine. Now, let's say I'm sitting here and I can no longer play my, I don't know, Ozu Blu-rays, right? But I can watch all those Ozu films online somewhere. In my personal opinion, I won't have lost anything. And I wouldn't even sit there and then say, well, look at all these Blu-rays now sitting there on my shelf. It's a waste, because it's like you said, it's a what if it's a source of curiosity and wonder. If you're like, look, this is how we used to watch it. It's still there. This was my passion and my interest, and I went out there and I cared about Ozu films, so I collected them. And Ozu's a great artist to me. That the fact that I have this Blu-ray, and while that was alive and kicking, I think it is a thing of value to you personally, and maybe it might even be objectively, but I think everyone is very obsessed with that because they're almost looking at it like, if you are in, like, I don't know, 50s or whatever, and maybe I'm misremembering the kind of date periods where this artist was active, and you bought a Rothko, it seems like all everyone's talking about is, oh yeah, you buy that Rothko, but as long as it's worth something in the future. And that's a lot of the discourse is about now. Like, is how wasteful is it? And obviously, you and I have opinions on that too. I think certain things, maybe you can look at that as wasteful if you're like, okay, what was the point of that particular film? It's not even one you care about that much, and you have it in a steelbook. Does it matter? I don't know. I don't like judging what people do and what they ascribe value to per se, but okay, I wouldn't do that. But do I feel like in 20 years from now, if I have a bunch of Ozu, will I sit there and say, oh, what a waste that I got this on physical media because, there's no players anymore, and the only way to watch it is online? I'll be happy that I can still watch all the Ozu online. But the real risk is it disappearing out of people's radar entirely, right? Because we look at movies and they're all there, but can they sustain that? Because then you have to think about it on the business side of things. And obviously, I have background in that. I am part of that world in a way. So then I think about that aspect. How can they keep that? How can movie keep being the service that it is for kind of contemporary art house? How can Criterion keep doing that? Yeah.
So I'll just add one more thing to these format discussion and stuff like that. I think I even talked about this with Tony earlier this week, but my dream is that someday there will be like a free online library where again we have these restored copies of all types of films, at least up to a certain point, that at least all the old films. I mean, I think you can make an argument that maybe like the very recent films that let the artists and studios make money on that, but then older films should be always available for people. But again, I don't think the corporations will let that happen, but that would be a nice pipe dream. And that's how it should be, that again, art should be accessible to all. It should be like we have these book libraries that have a great selection where you can get books for free. It should be that for art in general. But yeah, there are too many businessmen involved, but maybe someday it will be all accessible, but who knows?
Yeah, and of course, yeah, that would be the hope, or at least something where it's reasonable. And that's the one aspect of it we don't, people don't discuss is think about the BFI channel, think about obviously the Criterion channel and stuff, and how great they are that they exist, because really you can see so many films that don't even have physical media releases, especially in Criterion, of like film history from different parts of the world that you can watch. And so the idea is, if we go there and that becomes sustainable to provide that, and for a fee that people can afford, they get to have access to that. I mean, how wonderful is that, right? How wonderful would that be? And I think that's the point. So if the physical aspect contributes to that being available and finances that, I mean, that's great as well. So there are more layers to that than I think we often discuss.
And I would suggest to people that if you have the funds for it, that you should subscribe to Criterion channel, even if you don't watch it, just to support those types of efforts, because it's not that much. And I try to subscribe as much as I can. I just be watching lots of films there lately. They have such a great selection, and it's very easy to use the website and stuff. And again, a lot of people who aren't that tech savvy don't realize that you can actually use it also outside of the US if you just get a VPN, and you actually only need the VPN when you subscribe to it. But then you can, after you have paid for it, you can put the VPN off and then just watch it, even if your location is set to Finland or Brazil or whatever. At least for me, it works perfectly well. So
yeah, absolutely, it's great. Yeah, I remain subscribed to that, and if I didn't have anything, I would at least keep subscribed to that, because the catalog they have there that are available of rare films is amazing.
And again, lots of the stuff isn't available on physical media, on Criterion or elsewhere. So there are lots of kind of extra gems there that one can watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now we are starting to wrap up this podcast. I was just thinking that we could maybe just discuss, like, for a few minutes, that if we have any kind of plans for 2025, or like any types of plans, any New Year's resolutions or film watching plans or things like that. Again, it's really hard for me to say what next year is going to be like, because it's probably going to be lots of changes in things, because I'm not going to get into this now, but again, I'm planning to apply for a PhD probably. That's going to be my dream for a long time, as I've always kind of wanted to become a researcher of some type. So that's hopefully going to happen. Again, it's hard to say whether it will, but at least I'm going to try. And of course, if I don't get in at the first application, I can always apply again. And then, of course, I'm focusing on my weight loss journey, which is going really nicely. I've done 2 months and 1 week now, and again, doing this crazy fasting and stuff, cut all the sugar out and everything. So yeah, so that's been great, and I feel way more energetic already. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to continuing that. And the hardest thing about that is patience, because it's just gonna take such a long time because I have so much extra weight to lose, but it's going great. But because of these kind of big things, it's hard to kind of do like any kind of very strict plans for like film watching or reading. Although if the PhD happens, I'm gonna be reading way more, way more. So insane amounts of philosophy. So we'll see.
I mean, first of all, congratulations for all that, right? With your plan for the PhD and all that, and also like what you've been doing on the, lifestyle journey, and doing all those things, because none of that is like easy. But you did a good thing that it's like 2 months ahead before the year end when everyone does the resolution. So you already have momentum, and I hope you carry that on and continue on, because that's, of course, your health and everything is very, very important. I myself need to get more on that, because that's kind of fallen by the wayside, or it's gone up and down this year. um, but I find something like that is also important for your own like overall health, whether it's mental health and all that as well, physical fitness and stuff like that. So that's an important part of my resolutions. Another is to continue on with the film watching, obviously, um, and hopefully we'll discuss this offline. But to kind of discuss how we kind of take this podcast forward as well, because there was a gap and stuff like that. But having discussed the lessons we've learned and all this stuff, and doing the session today just reminded me of like how rewarding this is. So to continue with the film journeys, but yes, I'd like to read more.
Yeah.
I've been really focused on the film, but I'd like to take more time to read more. And some of the films help me because, as Wim Wenders has thrown in, for example, Wild Palms in not only Kings of the Road, but also in Perfect Days. So I've started reading that Faulkner work. I've never read any Faulkner, so I would like to kind of continue my interest in those areas, and music as well, because that's the other thing in this podcast is there's been a music journey as well, um, which I don't know if we'll have time for to actually do music discussions, but I'll still take recommendations and I'll keep exploring on the music side of things too. So
Yeah, so we aren't gonna say anything very concrete about the podcast as we need to discuss it ourselves still, but we'll try to, of course, do something as we both really enjoy it. And again, obviously, there were many plans for many films like beforehand, so maybe we'll get to return to some of those, and then also some things that we haven't mentioned, like Altes just got on DVD some Theo Angelopoulos films, and he's one of my favorite directors, so it would be great to talk about him. And I would have actually probably recommended him like even before, but again, the accessibility was a bit of an issue then. But now that it isn't an issue, we can get into his work as well, as he's one of those kind of life-changing directors, and he will fit really well with after our Tarkovsky and Bellatar discussions that we've had, as he is a bit in that kind of vein when it comes to his style of cinema. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. Again, you will see probably some new podcast at some point, but again, like I said, we are not gonna say any dates or anything like that, as we don't know. But you will see when it happens, and we'll see if we can also have back to some like more structure with it, that some schedule or whatever happens, we will see. Sorry, what will happen. And yeah, I'm excited to do more discussions and continue discussing art and being curious and open to all types of art. So that's always great. So,
Yeah, definitely.
and again, Happy New Year to everybody who has watched, and thank you for all the 5 viewers that our podcast has had for the year. Again, it's very much appreciated. And again, these would be fun to do even without any viewers. So
Yeah. Thank you very much, and happy New Year.
and you guys can let us know like what were some of your favorite watches of the year and things like that, or any thoughts about physical media's demise or something like that, or the nature of art or literature or music or anything that you want to say, you can say. Yeah. But yeah, thanks for watching. Don't drink Coke at all. I don't drink Coke at all, so now I can be honest when I say that. Yeah. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.